Welcome back everybody to another YouTube tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about PowerShell and PowerShell COM objects. Before we get started, I want to make sure you hit that like and that subscribe to help those YouTube analytics. So without further ado, let's hit the shell. Alright, so our setup today is we have VS Code on the right. Right now we have Windows Explorer. We're going to create this COM object and make Excel visible, which is done on line 5. So then I'll move Excel to the right so we can see what we're doing. Then we're going to create a workbook, a worksheet, rename some worksheets, and we're going to add data to it from Active Directory. We're going to close that file, and then later on in another script, open it up, add some more data, do some vlookups and some other cool stuff. So let's get started. So as you can see here on the left, line 2 is basically going to create that Excel COM object, which is going to be stored in an Excel variable. That Excel variable has properties and methods. One of those properties is visible. We're going to make it true. This will allow us to see Excel. Once we do that, I'll move it to the right, and then we're going to create a workbook and store that workbook into the workbook variable, which will allow us to do things with the workbook. So we'll go ahead and run this. Notice that we're using the Excel object. We're calling the method, we're calling the property of workbooks that's on the Excel COM object, and we're calling the method add, which will add a workbook inside Excel. Now we've done that, what we'll do is we'll select the first worksheet. Notice there's already one worksheet in Excel. So by passing the one parameter, it's going to select the first one from workbook. So we're going into the workbook object. We're going into the worksheets property, where multiple worksheets would be stored. We're selecting the item from the worksheets, and we're going to say 1. And we're going to store that into our worksheet variable. And then next, we're going to add another worksheet. And that worksheet, we're going to store it in the worksheet 2 so we can access it quickly without calling worksheet select 2 and all that fun stuff. So we'll go ahead and create this first worksheet into our worksheet variable. Then we'll create our worksheet 2 variable. Notice I'm doing the add method, so it's going to add another worksheet, and we're storing that into the variable. Notice down here on the right, if you watch, there's our next worksheet. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take worksheet 2. It has a name property, which is going to be the name of the worksheet. We're going to set it to users to search. This is something we're going to use later on for our vlookups. So we'll go ahead and run that code. Notice on the bottom right, it's going to change the name of that tab to users to search. We're now updating the worksheet, the first worksheet's variable, with the name disabled users because we're going to use our report for disabled users. So notice on the bottom right, it updated that. Next thing here, this activate is what's visually going to select the worksheet in the view on the right. So if we're already on that tab, it won't do anything, but if we're not, it's going to switch to it. So when I do worksheet, this is our first worksheet, and we say activate, it's going to switch to that. As you can see, it switched over visually down at the bottom right. So I know people have asked how to do that. That is how you do that. Next is going to be a query of Active Directory. We're just getting all the users, which I don't expect you to do this in a live environment. If you have thousands of users, this could potentially hurt your domain controllers, depending on how big your environment is. But basically, we're going to say where enabled is set to false. So we're grabbing all the disabled users, and we're going to put it in disabled users. So when I run that, it's going to store it into the variable. Now, one thing I know about disabled users is I know what fields I want, right, for my report. I want the name, I want the distinguished name, and I want the SID. So what I'm doing here is basically I know those items are going to be on row 1. So if you notice within the cells, so I'm working on worksheet 1 because it's $WS. I'm saying for the cells and item, I want for the first line on line 28, I want cell 1, column 1, and I want the value of that cell to be name. So this is where I'm building out the table headers for my table. So as long as you know what you want, this is how you would do that. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this code and kind of show you what it's going to do in these different cells. So let me run this code, and you'll notice it's going to populate those. So now I have my cell headers. So later on, when I do anything within Excel, I want to make sure I start on row 2. And so you can see here, line 33, we set in row to 2, because that's where I want my data to go after. I don't want to replace the fields I just did. And then this is a Foreach object, and basically what it's going to do is for each disabled user, it's going to go through the first user, and it's going to fill out the data in the spreadsheet. So that data, notice here, we're going to worksheet 1, regular worksheet. We're going to cells item. We're selecting our row, which our row is set to 2 right now. We're selecting column because we know column 1 is going to be our name, and we know what user we're currently using, right, in our query. So we're going to grab their name and put it in that field. The next one, we know it's going to be distinguished name. So we're going to pass the same row because we're still on row 1, or sorry, row 2. We're going to do column 2, and we're going to put the distinguished name, and so on and so forth. And then at the end of this, we're doing row plus plus. That's going to increment the row variable to 3. So the next one, it will do the same thing, but it's going to do it on row 3, row 4, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to basically highlight this for each loop and run it. Again, this whole thing could be a script. You would run it. I'm just showing you how the script works. So we'll run this. We'll see all of our data populate. So next thing is the data, if you notice in the spreadsheet, is not auto-size. So we want to auto-fit all these columns and rows, right? So how to do that is you call the worksheet again, you select the columns property, and then you select the method auto-fit. Now notice on this line I have void. If you don't have void, it just spits output to the screen. So instead of showing that output to the screen, I'm just calling it the void so it didn't show anything. So we'll go ahead and run that, and you'll see on the right side, all of our cells are going to auto-fit. There we go. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to find the last row in this sheet because we want to make this into a table. So the last row is 34. That's the one we want to get. So if you do worksheet.useRanged.rows.count, it's going to grab the last row of your data. Not necessarily the column, just the row. But we know in our data on the right, when we built this spreadsheet out, we know our row is C. The last row is C. So we're going to concatenate the C and the last row number, right? So it's going to be C34. So here we can see it's C. We'll go ahead and run this code. I'll show you the output in this PowerShell window, C34. So we're going to just put that into the last row variable. And now what we're going to do is we're going to select the range A1 to C3. So that's basically saying I want to grab all this stuff and I want to put it into a range variable. And so when we do this, it's basically like highlighting everything, right? And then this next line, it's some PowerShell magic. Basically, I found it online, but it basically what it's doing is it's going to build this into a table. And the main thing to know is that we have to pass that range to it. And that's what we're going to do here. So you can see the $range that we just did as a parameter part of this code. Now, if we do this and we put it into the variable table, it's going to build out this table. And again, this is something I found online. I couldn't explain to you how it works. I haven't looked into it deeply, but that is basically going to create this into a table. Now, what's really cool about these tables is they have styles. So if I go up here to the top and we look over at table, format table, each one of these tables have a specific name. So if you hover over it and slightly see right here, you can see that it shows table style medium 16. If you look in my code on the left on line 54, we have table style medium 20. So this is how you would select what color option you want. So if you like a certain color, I always like 20 for my colors. So I usually select that, but this is basically how you would hover over, get those values, and then figure out what you want in your code. I'm sure you could look this up online to figure out the names, but this is how I did it visually. So you can see each one has light, medium, and dark. So we're going to do 20. So this is basically going to change that color to 20. Boom. Now Windows Server 2016 is a little bit different than what's on my workstation. I usually like the dark blue column headers, but we'll go with the purple. But I'll change it to 18, and then you can see it changed the color. And again, if I were to go up here, highlight over those colors, that's how you would know what name to use. So here, medium 19. There's the color I was talking about earlier that I like. So I had the wrong one selected earlier, but we'll go ahead and change that. And again, this is how you would find those colors if you were trying to do a specific report, specific color scheme. Now we have that. What we want to do is we want to switch to that other tab. And how we do that? Activate method. So we call worksheet 2. When you say activate, it will switch to that tab. Now what we're going to do is we're going to populate some information in this tab. This is going to be what we're using for the vlookup later. So first column, we want the name, and then we're going to add some IDs in here that we want to do vlookup on. So these are the IDs specifically that we want to do a vlookup on. And now what we're going to do is we're going to select that last row again because we want to know how many items are in this list, which would be 4. And I want to run this code, and it's going to grab that, and it's going to grab row 4 on A, right? And so that's going to be our last row variable. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a for loop. And this for loop is basically going to run through, and it's going to do the vlookup syntax. So if you notice on line 68, or we'll start with the for loop actually. So if you notice, we set I to 2 because we want to start in row 2. And then we say as long as I is less than or equal to the row, we don't want to go past the row. We want to increment I. And then on the code below, we can see in the cells we're passing I, right, for our current row. And then we're passing the column. We know we want to do this in column 2, column B for the vlookup. And then if you don't know vlookup, we can do a deep dive on that. But basically, we're passing that formula in. So part of the cells, if you notice here, we're doing the dot formula. So we're specifying we want to use a formula. And then we're passing the string in, which is equal vlookup. We're saying column AI, $I. So that's going to represent what currently is in I. We're saying the disabled users tab. That's what we want to look up. We want to look up all the values within column A. So we're selecting basically the exclamation point A colon A means the entire column, and then we say we want an exact match. So that's basically going to throw that formula into the spreadsheet. So we'll go ahead and run through this for loop. Again, that $I just increments every time. So we're starting off with 2. We're going to go ahead and run this code. And there's our vlookup. Obviously, we say return the name that we want. So in our lookup, we're not saying put a specific value in there. We're just saying put whatever data is in there. If you find it in the list, put the name in the list. That's basically what we're doing with this vlookup. Obviously, you can do different formulas. I'm just showing how you would do a formula within PowerShell and Excel. So again, it's going to show the names of those columns as they match in the disabled users tab. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a header on column B. So we'll go ahead and just add that value in. I'll just call it vlookup or lookup. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create this into a table the same way we did it before. We have that last row. We're going to select the range, right, which is going to be A1 to B4. We're going to turn it into a table, and then we're going to select our favorite table color. And then we want to auto-fit these if they're not auto-fitted already. We'll do it to avoid so nothing comes out to the screen. And then here is how you save. So you call your Excel object and you pass it active workbook saved as, and then the path. And so in my code, what I'm doing is I'm adding that date time to it. So I have the date and time to my report. And then what we'll do is we'll quit out of Excel. So I'll go ahead and run that, and you see Excel closed. So now in our example PS1 file, we're going to manipulate this data again. So I know a lot of people ask how you open an existing workbook. This is basically how you would do it. You would do import file as a variable, or you can pass it later on in your method. And then what we'll do is we're going to aim at that file. We're going to open up a new Excel object. We're going to make it visible, set that to true. And then on the Excel object, we'll do workbooks.open and then the file path. And it's going to open that file. And we're going to store it in a workbook variable again so we can manipulate it. We're going to go ahead and grab our worksheet. We're going to show the name. This is how you would access the name property to make sure you're on the right worksheet. So we have users to search. If you need to read value from a cell, we're about to show that next. So one thing to remember is if you ever need to do something with the worksheet, you can pipe it to get member to see what's available. Here, we're going to switch to our worksheet 2 because that's the one we really want to work with. It's got more data on it. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to worksheet 2. We're going to activate it. And this is the data we'll be manipulating today. So here we want to read text from a cell. This is how you would do that. So now we can see we pulled the guest from there using the dot text. Again, the parameters we're passing in that is 2 for the row. So we want row 2, column 1, which pulled the text of guest. Next is we want to change the value of that field. So you can do that with the same kind of syntax. So worksheet cells item, you select the column and the row. So we want row 2, column 1. We're going to say the value, and we're going to make it equal to the new value. And notice on the right, we have the new value updated. So that's how you would change the value of a cell. Here, if you want to delete an entire row, you grab that worksheet, you grab cells, item, you select the row and the column, and you do entire row, and then you call it the delete method. We have it connected to void, so we don't see any output to the screen. So we'll go ahead and run that. And if you watch on the right, we deleted a row. If you want to delete a column, it's the same way. We call worksheet cells item. We select the row, we select the column. We call the entire column property, and we call it a delete method. Again, using void, so we don't spit anything to the screen in PowerShell. That would be a delete of a column. Next, we're going to search the worksheet for a certain string. So this is what we're going to be looking for is the Kerberos user, and we do the search. And now what you're going to see is search has certain properties in it. We're grabbing the row of that user with the dot row. We're going to grab the column of that user, and this is so we can change that data if we want to. And you can see in the row we have 2. If we highlight column and run it, we have column 1, so it found that. And then we'll scroll down, and we're going to do the update of that value. So we're doing worksheet 1 again. We're calling cells item. We're passing that row and column. So that's going to be row 2, column 1. We're changing the value, and we're changing it to subscribes because you subscribe to this channel. Next, we're going to do autofill. So this is going to be a unique one. We're going to create an extra column on the end. And so this autofill is kind of like if you have numbers, right? And you want to pull those numbers down and expand them. So you have 1, 2, 3, and then you want to grab the bottom right corner of that cell and do an autofill on the rest of those numbers. This is how you would do that. So we're going to go ahead and create another column called number. We're going to put 1, 2, 3 in there. And then this code right here is going to represent that autofill. So we're going to grab the range of D4. Notice that on the right, I kind of made a syntax error here. So we're going to fix it because there is no D column. We deleted some columns earlier. It's the C4 and change it to C4 to C34. And then we're going to go ahead and pull down on this. Basically, it's going to look like that pull down right there. I'm going to pull down that code. So this is going to do the autofill. Now, one thing to notice on the last one, there's a parameter 2. So that does make a difference. Obviously, I had an extra row in my code. But the main thing is that 2, right? So if you had that set to 0, it would just pull down a bunch of 3s. If you had it set to 1, it'd pull down a bunch of 3s. Those parameters basically are defining what kind of data manipulation it's going to do. For the increment, it's set to 2. I had to play with this to find it out. I didn't look online. Just know that that's what the 2 is doing at the end of that properties. So that's it. We're going to go ahead and go over, and we're going to go ahead and save and quit this workbook. And that's all I have today. If you have anything you'd like to see or want to know more about, let me know. Make sure to like and subscribe, and see you next time.